Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Welcome to the middle of the Pacific, in the middle of the galaxy, somewhere in the universe. Maui, Hawaii, day 2, July 3rd, of our very generic title, a global virtual gathering of good people. And I am blessed. You can't see them at the moment. If I could turn my camera around, you could see them, but feel them. I'm for the first time outside of yesterday in nearly 2 years in the company of some beautiful men and women. And I want to thank you for being online. I want to thank the people in the room here today to being a part of my life in this radical moment of, I want to say truth-telling, but the courage to truth feel. People ask about meditation, synonyms, the courage to feel more truthfully the nature of being in your own body. The courage to feel the truth of your own nature in your own body. And the Dhamma of that, a word that I use frequently, the Dhamma of nature. Purposely engaging consciousness and context to interiority, to what appears to be external at the confluence of the sentence. Pay attention, please, at the senses. And right there, we're choosing to relax, let go, no longer subscribe to self-generated suffering, conflict, shame, worry, doubt, anger, rage, blame, projection, hate, violence, war, rape, genocide. Okay, the metastasizing of delusion, sorry to use a medical term, that convulses. Take a moment, just look around the world. My teacher Sayadaw U Pandita would often say to people, everything is mind generated. To know your mind, let's go there. To know our mind, the collective mind, the individual mind, the confluence of the individual with the collective, to know one's own mind, the most important task, he would say to people, of your life. Then he would make a big, long, esoteric pause. Imagine all the things in the world today based on what we're doing unknowingly. Every war, every massacre, every girl being raped at this very second, every human being trafficked around the world, every torture, every violation, every desecration, every murder, the factory farming of animals and birds and fish. All of that violence comes from within consciousness. To know your own mind, the most important task of your life. In the absence of knowing your own mind, you run on conditioning. You run on the deeper impulses of something that even precedes conditioning. We're going to talk more about that. Anyway, welcome aboard. Day 2, here 10 a.m. until 12 noon in the middle of the Pacific in Hawaii. The topic today, the topic for me today is, I was asked yesterday about, how should I put it? My own practice. I think that's the word. I'm not fond of the word practice. How do I live my Dhamma in my life? And I wrote a book years ago called Instinct for Freedom. It's a title I borrowed from Noam Chomsky. By following this impulse in one's own soul, one's own heart, one's own consciousness, the impulse to elevate the status of freedom, to liberate freedom, that's the driving ethos, if you will, of my Dhamma. Freedom from, as it's been said by Isaiah Berlin, freedom from negative qualities, fear, freedom from fear. And pause. Not an absolute freedom from something, but let me introduce a concept introduced to me by Sayadaw U Pandita and Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, and I talked about it back in '95. It's a very valuable concept which overcomes the either-or of this state versus that state. It's called the quivering of a state of mind. The quivering with freedom. Like, for example, when I was with her and she brought up the issue in answer to my question, What is the essence of a revolution here at the 4th of July? What's the essence of a revolution of the spirit? She says the people out on the street risk their safety, their home, their income, often incarcerated, some of them tortured, some of them killed. It's not easy to come out of the safety of your own corner and stand in solidarity to the democracy and to the freedom of our country. So they have to learn how to quiver with freedom rather than being in the absence of fear in order to be fearless. We don't operate that way. We learn to quiver with compassion, quiver with loving kindness, a sensitized sense of vibratory vulnerability, quiver, a vibratory vulnerability at the front edge of your own expression of beauty. If you're championing freedom as the priority of presence, which I feel that I do, to the best of my ability, I'm learning the etiquette, the artistry, if you will, the aesthetics of how to be vulnerable at the edge of transformational awakening. I'm not saying collapse into a culturally sanctioned weakness. I'm saying take the ideals out of it, but root more deeply in the purposefulness of dignity and conscience and action, where the freedom is free to quiver without the certainty of how it should look. Okay, I hope you're with me. I'm going to get into them. There are 5 qualities, but before I dive into them, back in 1989, when I was with the Dalai Lama, the year he won the Nobel Peace Prize in Newport Beach, he was giving a conference with 3,000 psychotherapists and himself on Buddhism and psychotherapy. Among many things that happened over that week, he was asked a question about his own inspirations back in Tibet. Who were the people in his life that touched him the most? Of course, the most honorable, one of the most honorable people in the world today and the most celebrated for his peace and his wisdom. He said, well, I have a man in Tibet known as the Weeper. And of course, this man cries a lot of the time. And so to cut to the chase, I could tell this story over the course of a day. He said, the Weeper is a man who's dedicated to the evolution of empathy. What is empathy? The ability of the human heart, you and me, the embodiment of empathy is the action of placing consciousness and feeling and consideration and kindness and patience and compassion, the composite known as empathy, into the mind or being, call it a positive projection, empathy, into the being of another being. And there you situate, hang, called by Thich Nhat Hanh, deep listening. Empathy has the quality of deep listening. How well do we feel is another way to look at it. The presence of other. How easy it is to be in haste, in predictable patterns of communication. If you're more of a poser, you want to impress. If you're a bit of a hustler, you want to coerce. But the purity of that interaction, known as the invisibility of this quality of empathy, really sees and situates one's soul, heart, mind, body, conscience. You know, I really am a stickler for taking words that we normally use in life, and I encourage you, should you be interested, find synonyms for words that we use and develop more nuanced colorizations of them. Empathy is a convenience, but what does it really mean? My teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita, would often ask people, what do you mean by that? Get in the habit of self-inquiry. What do you mean, Carol, John, Larry, Shakti, by that? It's not an interrogation, it's the action of curiosity, of mindfulness and empathetic, self-empathetic action. How do I really hold the meaning of something? Are you with me, Hang? Thank you. So the Dalai Lama was said to have admired this man known as the Weeper. Okay, imagine. He went on to tell the audience of 3,000 therapists, the Weeper would go out about the day to actively cultivate empathy and compassion. So hypothetically, here we are walking down the street of somewhere in Syria, and there we see a young girl who's suffering from human devastation syndrome. She's lost both. She's lost her brother. She's lost her right hand. She's right-handed. She can never write again unless she learns to do the impossible. She can do it, but it's going to be tough. She also lost her hearing from percussion bombs made by Americans that got rich off the war. Maybe you own some of those stock options. Reflect. Interrelated wisdom. And there we see the young girl in Syria here in the middle of this temple in Kula, Maui, Hawaii. And you have that girl in your home, wherever it may be, and we are embodying the teachings of the Buddha delivered by the Dalai Lama to an audience of 3,000 psychotherapists in 1989. Today, July 3rd, 2021. We're taking the past, recreating it historically in the present. Call that reverse wisdom empathy. Learning from history, right? Mindfulness, reflecting upon the past, bringing it into the present. Here we have the young girl in Syria, and we're practicing Weeper Dharma. Okay, hang with me on that. Can I ask a favor? Not to use that man. It's okay. Nothing to say. And the Weeper is looking directly into the eyes of the young girl. And he is practicing what you're practicing. Have empathy on me, please. Empathy on you. Now, make this a meditative experience. Don't just hear it as words, please. We visualize in the room right now the young girl in Syria in our present apartment, home, land, wherever we are. And there we're cultivating, how does she feel? Almost impossible. We want to run. We want to escape. The Dalai Lama said the Weeper would get down on his knees so that he wouldn't walk away in fear. He made heart-to-heart contact, eye-to-eye contact. He began to feel. He began to weep. He began to cry at the suffering that he believed the girl was in based upon the human devastation syndrome, her karma, her circumstances, the loss, the anguish, the pain. Okay. The Dalai Lama paused and told the audience, "Why is the Weeper my hero?" And this is a very amazing statement, coming back to the word quivering with compassion. He said, the Weeper can cry in the face of suffering. I rarely ever do. Now, there's a lot of different dimensions for me in that teaching. One that comes to mind today is how we, how we inauthenticate our realities based upon unrecognized idealistic projections on what we should look like in the face of our Dharma. Okay? Unrecognized idealistic projections that infuse the perception of what we're experiencing with a false narrative of how we should look, rather than the pure quivering with the authenticity of an interbeingness, to use a Thich Nhat Hanh word. Whoa, you mean I can be myself? Yes. Okay, this is point one in my daily practice called rebirthing. And this is the concept that my teacher, Seda U Pandita, not really a teacher, a Kalyanamitta, very different word, introduced me to some years back. Of course, rebirth and re-death. And if those of you among the esoteric schools of Buddhism understand or believe in birth after birth, there's so much of that in the Buddha's teaching. But here he's introducing the concept of rebirthing as a way of shape-shifting consciously, sculpting, releasing, quivering, sculpting, releasing, quivering as we interface with self and other. We talk about being authentic, we talk about being in integrity. All I'm trying to point to here is how I go about the business. And again, you may be having to pay attention to the language. I encourage you in your notebooks, in your heart, write words down specific to your process. You can write things down that friends say or you read in books or what I'm saying, but that's just a distant kind of pointing. What is the teaching, the Dharma for you? Yesterday I went into this thing. We've got a room full of beautiful tankas here. Some of them Avalokiteshvara, some of them the Buddha, some of them Tara, some of the symbols I don't even know. But if a tanka I had in my room would be my fingerprint. And that tanka means to me that the fingerprint is utterly unique as I understand it. No two fingerprints are the same. Okay? We do Dhamma, we infuse idealism unknowingly into the interface of now time presence in context to self and other, empathy and action. Okay, we're learning to grow and enlighten through otherness, Ubuntu. No two of us will kiss alike. Oh, really? Isn't Nibbana the same for everyone? Isn't truth across the board? I don't know what the word is to talk about the variances in luminosity. How many colors are there really in the complete nuanced rainbow? Okay, all of a sudden I'm Sir Isaac Newton, or you're Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, the room now is being dosed with high-grade acid in your tea. You don't even know it. You've never done it before. And all of a sudden I say, hey friends, I've got something I've invented. It's called the prism. And all of a sudden there's a beam of light, and she opens the blind and it goes right through the prism, and all of a sudden where there was a blank wall, there's the rainbow. Mind blown, right? I'm asking in this analogy, what is your active use of your prism? Or are you singularly always looking at just light as light? Gradation is very much part of the quivering within a state of consciousness. Learning nuance. Meditation isn't getting it right. It's just simply becoming subtle. Nuanced. The opposite of myopic. The difference between projection and vulnerability. Vulnerability implies openness. Projection implies certainty. And so much of this language points to a very common thing that we overlook. The Dhamma isn't a linguistic puzzle. It's the art of extracting from these auditory vibrations, called etymology in shared space, in definition through the ear. It's all experiential, right? Again, I'm sorry to keep using these psychedelic metaphors, but if we were on a psychedelic now, or we were in some other state of whatever, we would really know that what's being said and felt is in real time, ultimate, deep, all-inclusive dynamic. We cannot go out in the world and say, this is where nature is and this is where nature isn't. We are alive, right? Okay, so get that. God damn, I'm alive. It's going to happen. I'm going to die if I identify with the body, for sure. Okay, another topic. Fingerprint, quivering, projection, nuance, interface, confluence dharma, quivering. I don't know that we're really, living at that so-called, I want to be very careful with this word, living at that intimate region. I wanted to use the word edge, it's too sharp for me. That intimate region of knowledge, of familiarity, and inarticulate inarticulateness. Yeah. Where I'm stumbling with not knowing who I am. And I'm right there in that state of quivering with self-identity. Okay, so many people become enlightened and all of a sudden they're fixed statues of certainty. And all of a sudden they don't even know they've been re-inhabited by dogma, and they label dogma as enlightenment. I've seen it perpetually across the board. And they're not really quiverers. Vulnerability is sort of a word they may in their lexicon. If their partner forces them to confess in therapy on ayahuasca, maybe they might admit to a couple of minutes of vulnerability. But they're shackled with the certainty of their attainment. Do you know those types? They're called Dharma teachers. They're called shamans. Not all, but most. But here in this first point, rebirthing, I wanted to use this, rebirthing. I'll get into the other four. The 5 point, this is my 5 points of reference in my own presence that I use to the touchstones of my transformational presence in nighttime reality. Rebirthing, R. Bhavana, B. R-B. P. Parami. Parami is such a beautiful word. We're going to get into it. U for Ubuntu. The South African term, I use the word Ubuntification. I like the verbing of it. The Ubuntification of shared space. I like fluid energy, dance, the poetry of rhythm and movement and style. Rebirthing. U Pandita would often encourage me in the conversations that we had prior to his death. You can live your life mindfully and you can live your life in rebirthing. Think of what touches your heart with regard to artistry. I, for decades now, have coupled Dharma, meditation, yoga, and asana with artistry. I just happen to love art. I don't know what that is exactly, except innovative uniqueness that's true to you. Artistry across the board with these beautiful paintings. The artistry of simply looking at a flower. The artistry of bathing. When I stopped smoking back in 90-something, I had so much time on my hands rather than a cigarette. I didn't know what to do particularly. I learned to kayak, I learned to run again, I did yoga again, but I still had way too much time on my hands. And so what I did, I stopped taking showers and only took baths. Very kind of weird, right? But I slowed down. I bought soaps again. I learned to wash my face slowly rather than doing it quickly to get out of the shower to help, eat again, to go have another cigarette. So many people go through life prioritizing the event that they think is better than the event that they're doing. And of course, yogi life and poetry and artistry takes the final chapter out of the book, and, cliched as it is, listen, we're on a death march to mortality. There ain't no doubt about it. Planetary, national, human, everything is on a death march to the end of its breathing, swimming, flying, whatever it does that's called its life force. It may be a rebirth on the other side, but guess what? Cemeteries are filled with death. We're on that journey. What in the hell is the hurry to die? Rebirthing. Invincible presence. I look at you, angel of death, and say, hey, sister, brother, Buddha, goddess, I love you. I refuse to participate in your narrative. We talk about boundaries. I refuse to participate in limiting narratives of presence. Artistry. Those who are artists lose it on the canvas, on the stage, in the recording studio, on the bed, in the sofa, in the sky. Whatever your art is, make an art out of washing your face. Make an art out of drinking a glass of wine. Make an art out of touching your lips with water. People ask about what it means to live in a monastery or be a yogi or intensive meditation, God forbid. It's just taking speed and convenience and basically saying, hey, here's a sacred garden. Abide in the sanctity of your truest sense of identity. At the end of the day, I don't want to be a fucking enlightened Buddhist. I want to be true to the essence of my soul. Yes, that's poetry, but why not use poetry in this life? Speak to yourself in a way that you want to make love. That's been my dharma. Rebirthing is the artistry of taking consciousness embodied in form and making your life an expression of your art. Take the pedantic nature of being on the road again and the 9 to 5 and all the ways in which we create claustrophobic, conditioned, cubist-like existences. And hey, I have a chance today to play an innovative, risk-taking beauty. I am not old. I am not aging. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. It doesn't have to be so heroic, but it's going to be birthing into present time phenomena. And I'm going to take some risks there to the point where I'm weeping. I'm going to consider people outside of my normal tribe. I've never really brought a girl from Syria who's dealing with human devastation syndrome, which is a new classification, by the way, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's an irretrievable trauma. That comes from American bombs, tax dollars, collusion, self-collusion to repeat habit patterns that keep you from rebirthing. Then you get old, then you get angry, then you get stressed, then you get dysfunctional, then you get judgmental. But if you're rebirthing, you're a child of God and the Goddess and the Buddha all the time, at any age that you want to be. And so rebirthing is number one. If you have questions, they're going to be coming. 2, B for bhavana. Bhavana, the beautification of consciousness. When people ask, do you meditate? I say no. What do? I practice bhavana. What does that mean? Consciously choosing qualities of consciousness on the palette of my interior and mindfully painting with them inside of my being and at the confluence of my eye, ear, nose, body, tongue, and body with you. Bhavana, the beauty. What else to fucking do? I don't know if you're not into aesthetics. I mean, you want to live like you can live it any way you want. But, whoa, to choose style. Let me just pause here for a minute. I was reading about, what's her name? Visakha, the chief female patron of the Buddha during his life. And apparently she was just deeply connected to her own inner cosmopolitan or inner vogue. She loved clothing and jewelry. And she celebrated style. I never really knew this until I reread it this morning. May I invite you within your own dharma, your own artistry, your own process of inner being in life, your own quivering at the edge of your own authenticity. Play with style. The way you choose your makeup, your clothing, your dress, your undergarments, the way you undress, the way you brush your teeth, the way you comb your hair, your style, your clothing, whatever it may be, don't just play according to nature. Invest in style so it brings you a certain kind of aesthetic joy. Bhavana, the beautification of consciousness, isn't necessarily devoid of form. Choosing the way what we wear, how it feels on our body, choosing the various ointments and the various things that we put onto our skin, choosing the quality of the food and the drink that we put into our bodies. the aesthetics or the birthing or the beauty of the words that we choose, how we choose to say them. You know, let me pause here with this issue of bhavana. One of the things I asked Aung San Suu Kyi, here she is being paraded before the world court in this evil empire in Naypyidaw, the capital of Burma, in these incredibly false charges in this Orwellian satanic military tribunal, you know, orchestrated by sick totalitarian satanic men. She's one of us. And I know that because she's my friend. And I know a lot of her friends and mentors. And we spent a lot of time together. And one of the things I asked her when I first met her back in '95 was, what do you remember about your relationship with our shared teacher, Seda U Pandita? And she said, oh, I had so much time on my hand under house arrest. I thought so much about my relationship with him. He encouraged us, you could never be too mindful. But what I remember the most is how he talked to me about the importance of communication. We talk about beautification of consciousness, the three streams of experience: thought, speech, action. Beautifying the three streams. Choosing qualities of consciousness to inhabit those three streams in the aesthetic and the artistry connected to your dignity, your conscience, your integrity, your poetry, your intimacy, your eroticism, your sexuality. Why divorce from that? And your freedom. She said, I remembered everything he said to me about speaking. He encouraged me that because we are revolutionaries of the heart, we don't use the fist or the gun or the drone. We use the human heart, the values of the human heart. Our revolution is one of conscience and consciousness. That's so rad. So cool. And he said, because we don't use the gun, the drone, the weapon, the jet, the missile, we use our voice as transformational, revolutionary vehicle in the context of totalitarianism and dictatorship in our country, using the power of the voice. He helped me to understand how to inhabit voice, this is my paraphrase, in a way that's revolutionary. I think that's pretty interesting. He encouraged me to embody truthfulness as motivation. We hear the word transparency and honesty a lot in the world. Truthfulness, if I were to ask on your palette of interior colors, in your prism, reflected in your own heart, what is the color of truthfulness? Can you go there as you would your daughter or your son, asking them to say transparency? And they say transparency, and you say that's it. So I'm asking you meditatively, where is truth in your own consciousness? How do you know truth to be truth in your own consciousness? I think that's pretty interesting to ask. So beautification and what I call Dhamma literacy. Mindfulness is the capacity to put the brush of consciousness, the pen and the ink of truthfulness, the brush and the ink of truthfulness, the hand in the water of truthfulness, the food in the nutrient of truthfulness, the oxygen of truthfulness in the lungs of freedom. Whatever you want to do to associate direct experiential communion, as the weeper did with the girl in Syria, quivering in empathy inside of himself to the point where he could induce tears. But the Dalai Lama went on to say, the weeper can at least cry. I don't cry. However, the weeper is still in development of his compassion because he often doesn't act to support the well-being of the child. Think of that. the gradations of authenticity. And so here we are in this beautiful little moment looking at truthfulness with Da Aung San Suu Kyi, and I invite you, I'm going to walk in truthfulness, I'm going to walk in transparency, I'm going to walk in self-honesty, I'm going to walk in authenticity, I'm going to walk in dignity and integrity and conscience. How many different words did I just use there? Do we know those energies within our own being? Are you practicing Dhamma literacy? Or are you driving down the wrong road of your own inner narrative? How well do you want to learn consciousness? Isn't that the deal? Let's do it. Let's go back to school in our own inner world, along with the self and the freedom of other people in this shared curriculum, and learn the energies, SOMs. So rebirthing and bhavana are deeply connected to the developmental intelligence of the study of states of consciousness. When I went to art school and studied art, you must learn colors. You must learn how to mix, blend, gradation, shadows, light, dark, shades, give dimension, texture, right? High pixelation, contrasts. Go there. Be nuanced, be subtle, be artist, be aesthetic. What does Tantra even mean? I breathe with you, you breathe with me. Let's expand beyond the breathing analogy into the entirety of being embodied in this invenerating set of conditions and tease out of these conditions what? Beautification is the opposite of what? The evilification of consciousness. There are dictators and totalitarians and deluded idiots that are addicts of evil. And are you free, Alan Clements, from evil? No, you're not, sir. So vigilance is a very important quality here at the edge of beautification. U Pandita was a very stickler with me. Guard your mind, Alan. Where's your mind? It's known at the ear. When you hear things, guard it from greed, anger, and delusion. He would say, don't pick it up. Smelling, tasting, touching, thinking especially, don't pick it up. And then, in the beautification model of bhavana, this is the active of the Dhamma. This is where Dhamma is in action. The Dhamma of release is one thing, but then there's the play of the aesthetic, the artistry of the Dhamma of active engagement. What do you want to inhabit? What is the asana of love if you do yoga? What is the asana of dignity? What is the asana of patience? What is the asana of determination? the asana of courage. Learn these different things. So, the beautification of consciousness. She went on to say, truthfulness, he told me, speak from truthfulness. Understand the words you choose to use as revolutionary transformational energy. No language. Choose your words rightly. Tone. Like the colors of a prism on the wall. Tonality. Tonality. One of the things I've introduced in my own personal practice this last year is tonal meditation. Gradation of sound. Whatever you need to do to emit and emote and to hear yourself in vibratory frequency so that you become unstuck. It's like a vocal ecstatic dance. Use your voice. You don't have to make sense. When I did voice lessons with Karen back in the early days when I've gone onto stages, we never really were articulate together. She just encouraged me to make sounds and to be spontaneous within movement. And what happened for me was within minutes I began to cry. Why? Because there was so much predictable, unrecognized forms of behavior and sounds that coordinated with those unrecognized interior sculptures, that I lived in a pretty much of a box-shaped, occasionally a rectangular, sometimes geodesic, not often, and occasionally with a psychedelic I'd break the roof off, but by and large predictable patterns of unrecognizable conformity. Doing voice and spontaneous movement, I began to cry. Crying was the quivering at the edge of inauthenticity with authenticity. Break out. What are you waiting for? A coffin? What are you waiting for? A partner to instill and evoke chemistry? Why are you so psychologically horny that you need chemistry to feel your beauty, right? I've said it for decades, be the chemistry that you seek. You'll only resonate higher from that place of actualization. Why wait, Dharma? Right? So, rebirthing, bhavana, truth, words, tone, she said to me, timing. You can say the right words in the right tone that are so rad and truthful, but at the wrong damn time, and they ain't going to hear it. I got something to tell you, George. You do you? Yeah, it's truthful. I'm going to say it lovingly. How about after dinner, Helen? No, now. Wrong time. You have to be very deeply considerate of the timing of something. And the last thing, I don't want to go on about this because there's other things to do, is a difficult one for me, is to do what I do without the need for it to be responded to. I dare say quivering with unconditionality. I use the phrase that's much more interesting to me than unconditional, which is liberating freedom. It's a way to enhance the beautification of consciousness and to create a kind of elegant, interesting sculpting of rebirthing, liberating my freedom, liberating shared freedom, liberating the flow of consensual freedom, shared intimacy, liberating freedom. So truthfulness, timing, tone, words, and the last she said to me is, listen, ironically in this country, the more metta we bring to our words, the more the authorities feel violated. If we thought that what we were doing was wrong, we would defeat ourselves. And so in a way to overcome self-defeat is to remove attachment to that which we do. Self-correction is very different than the attachment to how someone else should hear it, see it, or respond to it. Self-correction is constantly looking at the edge of the three streams on how to improve and to refine and to relax or to enhance thought, speech, and action. Okay, going on here, we'll take a short break in a minute. P for parami, U for ubuntification, and N for a unique word that I've only used in the last couple of years, the nibbanification. So let me say, these are the 5 touchstones of what I call my practice of world Dharma, not Buddhism, but world Dharma. Rebirthing, bhavana, parami, ubuntification, and nibbanification. I'm going to do the last 3 very briefly. We're going to take a short little break, and we're going to have a little engagement of questions and other topics that may relate to what I'm bringing up right now. Parami. Heightened states of excellence. I would encourage you to write down what those words are for you. In the classical Buddhist sense, I'm going to say them. There's 10 of them. Dana, Sila, Nekama, Panya, Virya, I'll get into the English, excuse me, Kanti, Satya, Aditana, Metta, Upeka. Generosity, ethical integrity, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. I wrote down some of the other ones that I personally call paramis in my life. Mystical adventure. What is the state of mind that promotes your sense of human adventure? Why go see a therapist or a plant medicine guru for that? Why not just cultivate it as a day-to-day curriculum of vitamin inner C? Mystical adventure. How cool. Maybe I should go up and camp in Haleakala for the weekend to get mystical. Cool. Shift context. Evolve the qualities of mind that you want to define your life by, so that when those who read out your memorial upon your death, they represent the life that you want to be seen having lived. Rebirthing. Don't age. Uncontrived naturalness. Not too bad. Innate and evolving authenticity. I don't like the word authenticity at all. It's like, sounds like some state that you get to and you're frozen. I'm an authentic guy. I'm like really like an inner kind of something you've done to something to create an authentic statue. Authenticity without integrity and dignity is narcissism, right? Enduring resilience. Resilience is just like too flat plane, but enduring resilience couples resilience with an ongoing courage. Uncompromising honesty. Not honesty sometimes when it's convenient, to state the obvious, but an uncompromising, I can trust you, girl. I can trust you. I can trust you. You might want to rethink that, Alan. I mean, I'm known to like occasionally cheat, lie, deceive. You know, I'm a trauma victim. I've got shadow. You know, I'm in therapy. I've got a personal shaman from Peru that I live with. And I mean, I just want to level with you. My truth is very conditional. Now, is that sociopathic conversation with someone who's grown up in like a deep spiritual environment, or is it truth-telling? Because you don't know anymore today with the language of truth and transparency. You've got to feel more intimately into the vibration of how dignified and truthful are those words, right? So, uncompromising honesty. Like I would ask someone, if I were to be in a relationship with someone, not about who your former partners were. It's all over Facebook and Instagram. But will you talk to me openly without having to do some kind of psychedelic to get to the truth of who you are? You know, I lie sometimes. I don't really like to say that, but I want to talk to you about that. But do you lie? And like when? And like when does it become exciting for you to like tell something that's not really true? There's got to be sometimes in your relationships with yourself and other people where you just want to fudge a little bit. Like, can I get it out of you that I can't trust you, so I don't want to bother with you? I know we've got chemistry, but you're a liar. No, I was a former Buddhist nun in Burma, like you. I'm a psychotherapist. I got a PhD in truth-telling. I'm paid a lot of money with clients. I do a little psychedelic therapy on the side. Hey, I've been to Tibet. Does that help? Do I lie? And I invite you, when we speak and sit and walk and talk, you don't have to tell me that you don't lie, but don't lie to yourself. I mean, if you're going to undress, get naked, right? There's nothing greater that I can see in my recent years than knowing that I can wake up and go to bed in the conviction that my conscience is uncompromised. I roar that out in my silence. I may not be wise and cool and generous, but my conscience is intact. Humble enough to be admonished. I don't know what the word is for that. But I learned that from my late, great teacher. Being humble enough to be admonished, that's not an easy thing. Creating and creative endurance. Reciprocal spontaneity. There's something about that in that play of shared space where there's a kind of unspoken verbal, emotional, existential agreement that we can play here and be safe enough to dance in virginal territory. Intimate shared flow. I'll take that over any book contract, any amount of money. Reciprocal shared flow, right? What is this? I come back to, what is the state of mind that facilitates that? I come back to Dharma literacy. I come back to Newton's analogy of the prism. Refract nuance within consciousness. Play in the aesthetics and the poetry of your artistry. Take dogma, tradition, and orthodoxy out of your heart. Die to conformity, spontaneity, improvisational honesty. If you don't want to meditate, who gives a fuck? I'm a Dharma creature living in the beauty of choosing radiant states of consciousness. I am empowering growth. I'm empowering the weeper. I'm empowering quiver Dharma. I'm uncertain of who I am, but I love the edge that I'm playing on. Will you come play with me in that Rumi-esque field? An Aung San Suu Kyi phrase, grace under pressure. And I see my brothers and sisters in Burma reaching out to me from places of 3 and 4 times a day, hiding from the authorities with their children being chased. These are family. To juxtapose their lives with what's going down here in my life, it's wow. Weeper for me Dharma is like rage Dharma. Like, what in the fuck, Biden, are you not doing and why? Where are you in your conscience? You're a world leader of the democratic globe, and you're letting the child of freedom, where the source of transformational Dhamma has been safeguarded for nearly 2,600 years, where nonviolence has given the radiance of a re-inspired form of transformation on the planet, where a woman who's divinely rooted in the feminine has won the Nobel Peace Prize, that basically has taken the vilification of the corporate media around the world and said, I know you children, you're my children, but I'm not going to revile you and judge you. I'll embrace it without a word. You've not heard one word out of her or her colleagues that condemned the world media or leaders, or you, Bono, you, Geldof, all of you who vilified her, who've never even been to Burma, never even had a minute in her company. All you are is informed by the BBC. Bullshit. You know? Burma's at stake. Democracy is at stake. Nonviolence is at stake. We have a chance to stand up. Grace under pressure. She said this decades ago. You can call our suffering as the renewal of courage. Repeatedly. Yes, get emotional. The Dalai Lama's image of the weeper. He's emotional. Why is it not acceptable to lose it in the world? As the totalitarian cage comes down on us digitally, we don't even know in our own families and friendships and our circles today what to believe, who to trust, who's been jabbed and who hasn't, who's lying, who's got faux passports. What in the hell is going down in our cultures? Here on July 4th of Independence Day, Frederick Douglass, I have to read this. In his famous speech, The Meaning of July 4th, for the Negro, July 5th, 1852, he said, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day reveals to him and her more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim this weekend. Okay? Let's be aware of the weeper of our histories. Syria is no longer in Syria alone. It's in our own hearts with collusion of denial. Burma, a radical revolutionary culture right now, and she's saying, courage is that which is required to be renewed repeatedly, that you could call grace under pressure. I can't imagine the 5,200 boys and girls, the filmmakers, the teachers, the nurses, the nuns, the monks, the journalists, the shopkeepers, the rickshaw drivers, the taxi drivers, who at this very moment are subjugated to the worst cruelties, just like Frederick Douglass said 150 years ago. So when I speak about my own Dharma practice, I wonder sometimes, is it really narcissism in action? Or do I cultivate empathy as priority of presence? So part of the beauty of all of this for me is in the words Ubuntu and Nibbana. Ubuntu here is the emotional inseparableness of I, other, I with self, I with sub-selves, self in context, self with earth, self in cosmos, self in multidimensionality, sub-selves with eternity, contextual awareness, relational dharma, as my friend Janine Davies coined, relational dharma. Ubuntu. Desmond Tutu of South Africa calls it, when one is in an Ubuntufied moment, one knows without a doubt we share the same oxygen. Pollute the oxygen, I die, you die, not just you. I am who I am through you. There's no other way to discover me than through context and relationship. It's the same meaning, in my understanding, more expanded perhaps in the word bodhisattva or bodhisattva. A being dedicated to discovering herself through contextual presence, the Ubuntification of shared space. My freedom and your freedom are inseparable. What will I do to enhance your life in order to enhance my life? Democracy in action, the opposite of violence. And the last word, Nibbana, I've taken this concept of unconditional freedom and brought it into a kind of transformational aesthetic called liberating freedom. Rather than being unconditional and quivering, crying, weeping, authenticating, the Nibbanification of shared space. When we embody that poetry, I feel more and more so, we're basically saying, I'm taking conditions out of my time with you. I'm not going to hustle you. I'm not going to talk to you about my needs and you to fulfill them, unless there's an agreement that there's some reciprocity to do that. Nibbanification means that I'm in a shared space all the time. I cannot live without food, oxygen, people who provide food and shelter, good and electricity. The world is so interrelated, but we're in so denial of that. We are in a global Ubuntu moment. Nibbanification here is the elevation of the essence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, freedom, rooted in conscience. Nibbanification is the elevation of freedom as the priority of presence. I refuse to coerce you. I refuse to manipulate you. I refuse to violate you. I want to enhance your life. I want to Nibbanify it. So I'll close. Rebirthing Bhavana, Parami, Ubuntification, Nibbanification. And I will close with this one story, and then that will be the end of this morning session. It's a favorite story of mine. It's called the story of Kema. She is the poetess goddess of ancient India. The Buddha, her best friend, and I don't know what the word chief disciple means. It's a little bit pedantic for me, but the deepest feminine ally in the constellation of their Sangha is Kema. Super rad woman, as I can understand it from the text. In short, beautiful in her own interiority. She had an aesthetic, it said, and a conditioning where she was unambiguous about the aesthetics of her form and her mind. Good parenting. I don't want to just use, she was beautiful. Good parenting. She stayed away from the Buddha because she had heard that the Buddha encouraged people not to place their virtue in their forms and to reinvent beauty. And she felt slightly uneasy about wanting to move the marker on the way she had identified with her own sense of beauty. But there he was in this forest with other boys and girls hanging, and she happened across where they were hanging because they were neighbors. She saw him and he saw her. Okay? Imagine being there. Imagine you are Kema and you're looking at your counterpart. The term, I don't know the term where it originated, but instant intimacy. Okay? Where you know you've arrived. You've met someone where there's instant intimacy, instant chemistry, and you're trusting it. You're at that stage in life where you're really trusting it. And the Buddha was said to have said that he entered a state of deep, intuitive intimacy and determined his relationship with her from history, from time immemorial. They had known each other apparently. Deep, deep brother and sister soul bond. And he read her mind, her energetic mind, and saw the edge of her personality structure, it said, where she was still grasping and attached to configurations of a limiting identity that she infused with high beauty. And he knew her heart was gifted to want to release from limiting forms of beauty. She didn't know how, nor did she have the desire to do it, except the Buddha felt that she wanted to, but didn't know how. So he helped her. He created in their shared space, which is so amazing. This is the shaman within the Buddhist tradition. He created an image of a psychic being, a woman that looked very closely like her, standing next to him. And she saw this woman, and he saw this woman, and the three of them were communing. And what he did, this is so out there, but those of you who have imagination know that it's not too far out there. He played existential theater with his mind creation. How it's done, those of you who meditate know that mind control is not so far-fetched. There's lots of things that come from early stage development of mindfulness, especially if you get to the stage of Uddiyabhaya Jnana, where the arising and passing away of phenomena is so amazing that innate deep dimensions of rapture and psychic skills are very prominent. You can walk into a dark room and you can light it up. It's a common thing. You can talk to deities. You can create things. You hear thoughts. You know thoughts. You can talk to people from a long distance. You know that. It's not the, liberated mind per se, but it's the phenomenology of insight. And this woman creation, the Buddha was said to have programmed to rapidly increase the pace of time. I mean, if you read quantum physics and Michio Kaku and Einsteinian theories of relativity, you can understand on a peripheral level, for me as a layperson, how time can be elongated and contracted. Okay, and how consciousness could create images. Look at us as human beings. We're created images. Why not have ephemeral creations? Okay. Well, in 1 minute, this woman that only Kema and the Buddha could see aged from 30 to 90. Imagine right now in our own psychic room, we had an image of ourselves that sped up time so that I saw that my life at this stage, in 1 minute, I aged, I died, the body bent over, collapsed onto the ground, it said in this discourse. Worms and maggots began to eat it. It ate the flesh. The bones began to dissolve into dust, and the body disappeared, all in 1 minute. Talk about a psychedelic hallucination. I had a dream, psychotherapist, last night, of a being called Alan Clements that died in 1 minute from the time it was born, and it aged. I saw it in my mind's eye. What did you learn, Mr. Clements? I learned there is not one thing in this world, in this body, in this consciousness, that you could hold on to and say, it's mine. You can't trust time. You can't trust beauty to be in form. It's all relative, sir. Is that the insight? Anicca vata sankara, upadavaya damino, upatichuva nirujanti, te samrupasamo sukho, the most often chanted phrase in Burma. Seda U Pandita at Mahasi Sayadaw's death cremation. Nearly 250,000 people. Anicca vata sankara, upadavaya damino. All conditioned things in this world are impermanent. To understand this truth, this Dhamma, is to live in the highest happiness. Happiness. Happiness, joy, knowing that I can nibbontify space. But we're in this warp. And it seems like it's a slow journey from aging to where we are, to death, and we fight it. We want to keep beautifying it. I want my own Botox if I can afford it. I want to fill in all the crevasses of my fear, to stop. I don't care how normalized it all is. You can't stop anything. But why not beautify through wisdom? We talk about embodied wisdom. What does it mean? Kema was said, as the Buddha talked to her, essentially as Jesus did, do not place your wealth where dust and rust doth corrupt. Why does that have to be mystical? I'm on the verge of imminent mortality being recognized in 1 split second. And guess what? You are too. Why not re-inhabit that beautiful place of the weeper, quivering in our own kamadom? And let's do something today that's so experiential. I invite you here at this final minute, so experiential that you're willing to rise up into the highest radiance of your integrity, your conscience, your dignity, your Dhamma resolve, and you say, I am today reborn. Are you willing to do that? Or are these just words you will write in your book and go home with and look a year from now and be inspired? Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your beauty. We have examples. You're an example. If I'm in doubt, reflect back to me, my own Kema. And may we celebrate this shared victory of understanding, rebirthing into life, the beautification of the mind, and know that we're all here on the 4th of July in our own country of America here, We're keeping a more radiant freedom alive, an independence that isn't about the subjugation of indigenous people or minorities or the color of your skin or whatever it may be that you desecrate and create a false narrative of hierarchy, and you play within the totalitarianism called America, the Third Reich. It's a lie. We must reinvent our independence. And this is the weekend for us all around the world to rise up into a higher freedom and take care of our brothers and sisters around the world. Syria to me is Syria. Burma is my Syria. What is your Syrian girl? Dance at the edge of that level of awakening. And then we start to enact what I call, as Daw Aung San Suu Kyi introduced to me, the courage to care about things larger than your own self-interest. She said, if we do that one person at a time, our revolution will be successful. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in this morning. We'll take a break now for whatever we need to do. You'll see us coming back here in Kula on Maui at 1 p.m. our time in Hawaii. And hopefully you'll come back, bring your friends, and we'll carry on with meditation, questions, and the next dimension of this global gathering. From my heart to yours, thank you.